Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek. Welcome to a solo live stream that I'm doing for you today. I thought I'd do a solo one just to give a chance to focus in on your questions today. We'll come back probably next week to having some guests on, but I thought I've got a lot of questions in from my patrons, and I see there's a few questions already coming in on the chat, so I thought this will give a chance just to focus in on getting some detailed answers going in there. So I thought what I'd do to start with, just to say hello to a few people over in the chat. If you're watching this on catch up, we've got quite a few questions coming in already, but I just want to say hi to everyone there. Who have we got? Bubba Husky, 26 Art Girl, Olivia Joseph, Fraulein Winter, Sonia, Nicola, Kathy, Angie, Tiziana. Who else have we got? Lost for Words, Nicola, Living My Rhapsody. Hi everyone, great to see you all. We've had a couple of super chats already, and as always, if we get super chats as we go through, then I'll try and make sure that we get to them as soon as we possibly can. Emilio, €10, thank you so much. Having to wake up at 6 tomorrow, so going to be watching this on catch up, so hi to you. And I think what we'll do is we'll start with the question from Alissa Mutlu, $5. Thank you very much. I think this is quite a good place to start, because what I wanted to focus this one on is the wall and the Night's Watch and the role of them. So Alissa asks, hi Robert, I am on a steamboat, so may lose contact. I hope you don't, but that sounds very exciting. What was the origin of the Night's Watch? How many men were originally required to man them all? So I think this is a good place to start. In terms of the origin, so the origin is one of these things which honestly is lost a little bit in the mists of time. But what we're told is that they originated during the time of the Long Night, way back 8,000, maybe a bit more years ago, and it was them who were involved in the final battle, the battle for the dawn, which defeated the others, which pushed the others back. And this then they were founded, and they instituted themselves with the vow, which I think we'll probably come on to a bit more later, to be protecting from that moment on the lands of humanity against the others. So that's what the initial foundation of them was about. And in terms of how big they got, well, obviously right now they've got a lot smaller. There's only as of the start of the books and the TV show, there was only about 1,000. I think there was about 600 in Castle Black, 200 in Eastwatch, 200 over in the Shadow Tower. At its height, there were about 10,000, so about 10 times the amount. There are 19 fortresses across the wall, and 17 of them at any one time were manned. So at its height, this was a much, much bigger organization than we've got at the moment, than we see right now. So that's where it's at. And then over time, they started to dwindle. But then, particularly in the last 300 years or so, after the North became part of the Seven Kingdoms, that's when they really started to tail off. So that's when the real drop-off came, and it turned from being a real place where people would, or noble families would send their children or their sons, because obviously no women were allowed into the Night's Watch, but send their sons off as a place of honor. And then slowly it turned away from that and became more and more a place where it was a punishment to be sent. So hopefully that's answered that question. Keep the questions coming in on the chat. I'll keep an eye on that. But I was just going to pick up on a few of the questions I had from my patrons earlier on. I can see some of them are there in the chat. Hi everyone. Related to this, we've got Pegleg Pete says, I have always wondered exactly what the North is supposed to be remembering. This is a slightly broader question, but I think this very much relates to the Wall and the Night's Watch. Everyone talks about it like the Lannisters always talk about paying their debts, but nothing specific is ever said. So what is it that the North were supposed to remember? And Pete suggests saying, I think they were supposed to remember something about the last battle with the Night King, possibly the use of dragonglass and Valyrian steel, but he's 99.99% sure that over the last 8,000 years, the North forgot. And I agree with that 100%. I think the North has forgotten, and I think it's not just one thing that the North was supposed to remember. I don't think there's just like one secret that the North as a whole was supposed to remember. I think they were supposed to remember the history of the others, of the White Walkers coming the first time, and how they are stopped. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen my video about the Horn of Winter and the Crypts of Winterfell. I think that is part of the defense mechanism that humanity had. How you actually how humans were supposed to defend themselves against another incursion, and it was very important that the North corporately remembered how that happened. It's not just a matter of we just have to fight them with lots of bodies, because clearly bodies were capable of being used by the others against humans. So it's very much a matter of we've got magic, we've got protections in the Wall, and we've got protections based in Winterfell. So that's what I think that the North is supposed to be remembering. Another question I've got in from Kathy Stark, who I think I saw you in the chat. So hi, good to see you. Saying, what do you think the meaning and significance may be to the phrase in the Night's Watch oath, "I am the Watcher on the walls," when obviously there's only one wall? Now, this is a really good question, and to be honest, I even went back to double check it for myself just to make sure. Yes, it does say I am the Watcher on the walls. Now, I think for me this comes back to the very beginning of the Night's Watch. We think of the Night's Watch and the Wall as happening at the same time. They didn't actually happen exactly the same time. First of all came the Night's Watch, and then after that, the Wall was built. And incidentally, George R.R. Martin has said on a few occasions, the Wall didn't used to be that high. It didn't used to be this massive thing. It used to be a sort of a normal height wall, and it's just over the centuries, the Night's Watch have built and built and built, and it's got higher and higher and higher. So, so when the vows came into effect, the Wall wasn't this massive thing, physical thing that we see today. But in answer to the question, what are the walls? Now, I think there's there are 2 or 3 possible answers to this one, and I think the honest answer is we do not know. But the first is in a sort of colloquial sense, saying the Watcher on the walls is the kind of thing that you would talk about somebody who's defending a castle. The Watcher on the walls, the person who's keeping an eye out. So it's quite a colloquial thing, not just necessarily talking about the wall, but also if you're thinking about the fortifications on the wall, they would be people looking out from there as well. And in the time of the First Men, obviously there were other encampments north of Fist of the First Men. We don't know the exact history of that, but that was another encampment north of the Wall. So there were numbers of different fortifications around, not just this one megalithic wall. But I think there's another. So I think that's the most likely. It's just a sort of a colloquial phrase talking about the walls, and I think actually, Tiziana just caught my eye. Tiziana Vitali says, could it be that there was more than one wall, maybe one located where the Fist of the First Men is? This is something, and Bran the Builder, who's also there in the chat. Hi, Bran, good to see you. Something I know that he's done an awful lot of work on, so I don't want to steal Bran's thunder, but yes, there is the possibility that if you look at the inspiration behind the wall in the real world, this is Hadrian's Wall, which is across the north of England, an attempt to keep the Picts, the Scottish, out. But although that's the famous wall, there was also a second wall called the Antonine Wall. Now, the question that a lot of people have had, and as I say, Bran has thought about this quite a bit, is what if that is reflected in the world of Ice and Fire? What if there was more than one wall to start with? And I think it's possible. I think that for me, there would be some kind of memory of this, some kind of legend of it, some kind of story associated with it, if that were the case. But I think it is entirely possible. And I think that people have put out strong cases for that being the truth of it. So in answer, it's quite a long-winded way of saying, I think the reason why the vows say that is quite a colloquial, being the watcher on the walls. You would say that about anyone who's keeping an eye out on behalf of the people behind those walls. But also there's a possibility that there was more than one wall. So I hope that one answers that one for you. I'll do one more of these questions from my patrons before I dig into the questions that we've got coming up. Do keep the questions coming up. Telemasker Dan asks or says, I'd like to know more about the magic built into the wall and how exactly it was broken to allow the Night King to pass. This obviously being a show question rather than a book question, because the wall hasn't fallen yet in the book. Was it a combination of the Night King touching Bran within the weirwood net and the magical properties of the ice dragon, or was the touch enough and the ice dragon was just the tool? I think this is quite a complicated thing, but I think that the way to break this down is to think of the wall as being a barrier in two senses. It is a physical barrier. It is a big, tall wall that stops people going through, and it is also a magical barrier. Now, what brought down the physical barrier, and this is all show stuff, so if you're book people, then it might be slightly different in the books. I suspect it may be, but we'll leave that to one side for the moment. But the physical barrier was indeed brought down by ice dragon fire, for want of a better word. But the deeper question is, what about the magic? Now, we're told from a few people, again, we don't know all the detail of this, but we're told by a few people that there are magical barriers or wards that are set into, literally carved into the foundations of the wall. Now, these, from what we hear from Benjamin on the show, Cold Hands in the books, these are to prevent the dead from passing, to prevent the White Walkers from coming across the wall. And this sounds very familiar if you're thinking back to the Three-Eyed Raven's cave, to what seems to have been the case there was that they had some kind of magical barrier. You'll have seen that there were the whites, who look quite skeletal whites, who seem to have been waiting outside, and then when they tried to cross, they broke apart. And that magical barrier was broken, as Dan says, by Bran's contact with the Night King. So it seemed to be that when the Night King touched Bran, that did two things. First of all, he made a bond and alerted the Night King to where Bran was. and then secondly, it allowed him to move past. So the implication is that that same principle that happened in the Three-Eyed Raven's cave is what has happened to the wall. So they can cross it, or they can get past the magical barrier, because Bran, having now passed across, has allowed the Night King to pass across, as happened at the Three-Eyed Raven's cave. It was never spelt out, it was never said explicitly, but that was the implication of what happened. Now, we don't know if that's what's going to happen in the books, but that seems to have been what happened there. And the link between Bran and the Night King seems to be quite an important one on the show. But we'll come on to that. I've got I'll mention this more a bit later, but I've got at least three videos on Bran that I've got in preparation that I'm going to be rolling out over the next few weeks. So there's an awful lot of information there that I want to get to. But guys, I've talked quite a bit there. Let me just have a quick flick through some of these comments there, and I'll try and pick up a few of these questions that we've got coming on. Let's start quite near the top. Danielle Marston, picking one at random. Every big battle has had an additional army come to the rescue. Is there an army we haven't seen yet that could come to the aid of Winterfell if a battle against the others occurs there? That's a really good question. I think, well, we've got the very obvious army that is sort of, we haven't seen yet, but is in the wings, is the Golden Company. Personally, I don't think that they're going to be coming to the aid of the North. I think that they've been hired by Daenerys. Euron's gone across to get them, and I know there's a lot of theories about them double crossing her, but I think certainly to start with they will be loyalists and they will be the Lannister army. But I do buy into this idea that Melisandre has gone back to Volantis for some reason. And she is going to return with something that she thinks will be useful in the Battle for the Dawn. Now, I think on the in the books, there is a huge uprising which is bubbling under the surface amongst the worshippers of the Lord of Light, and I could certainly imagine that if something similar happens there, they could all be following Daenerys across to try and fight in what they see as this apocalyptic battle, fight for the future of humanity. On the show, they might just boil that down to have the Fiery Hand, which is the temple guard over there at the temple of R'hllor in Volantis, but I think Melisandre will definitely be coming back with something. So I hope that answers the question. Now, whether they will save the day is a very different matter. Okay, let's have a look at a couple more questions in here. Laura says, Robert, can you please talk about these incessant plot and script leaks? I'm guilty of watching, and I must say some pretty exciting stuff. Laura, so I've said this on various different places. My view here is that I am not going to personally comment on each and every one of these plot leaks, the script leaks, and things that come out for two reasons, really. First of all, an awful lot of them are just not true. Script leaks and things like that, it's just that way lies madness, trying to second guess what the plot is. And secondly, I know that there's a huge amount of people who actually want this to be a bit of a surprise. They don't want spoilers. And so what I'm trying to do is create on my channel, as much as is possible, a safe space for people to come here. There are plenty of places, and there's no judgment here. There are plenty of places if you want to go and read about script leaks or plot leaks to go and do that, but I'm trying my best on this channel not to go down that route. So sorry about that. There is a lot of interesting stuff going on out there. It's quite a hard job trying to sift through to actually what's really going on there. Tiziana says, OMG, you pronounced my name properly. I hope I did that again. I always get when people say well done for pronouncing my name properly, I then can't remember what I said the first time, so I hope I got it right again that time. Okay, so Livia Joseph, Robert, do you think there will be a Night's Watch at the end of the war? This is a very good question. I think there will probably be some members of the Night's Watch surviving, and I think a lot of this will come down to what the purpose of the Night's Watch is. And over time, it seems to have moved to this protecting against the Wildlings. I think that purpose is no longer going to be there at the end of the war. I think that we will reach a point where humanity recognizes that the Wildlings and people who live south of the wall, they're all human. There is no reason why there needs to be a barrier between the two, why the Night's Watch need to be protecting humans south of the wall against humans north of the wall. So the question is whether or not any of the White Walkers remain a threat, therefore meaning that we need to have the Night's Watch, and indeed whether we need to have the wall. I think it's entirely possible that, and I suspect certainly in the books, we are not just going to get the army of humanity defeating the army of the others or the White Walkers and wiping them all out, and then that's it, hooray, well done us, we defeated the big baddies. That doesn't seem to be the way this story is working. It doesn't seem to be something that where the answer, the solution is a battle, victory for the biggest, the toughest people. That doesn't seem to be the message that's coming across through Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. So I think that the mass elimination of the White Walkers is not how this story is going to end. I think that they will retreat, be pushed back, their threat will be minimized, but they will still be there off somewhere in the lands of Always Winter. And as a result, I think, yes, there will be some sort of Night's Watch who survive. Now, exactly who will survive, I think is open to question. I think the most interesting question there, personally, is who will be the Lord Commander. Now, what we've found is that actually they're coming up to sort of a milestone. J.R. Mormont was the 997th Lord Commander. John was the 998th. Ed on the show 999th. So the question is, who's going to be the 1000th? And I think there are a number of candidates for who that might be. I think Jorah Mormont might be a very appropriate person to go there to take over his, if he regains the family honor, to take his father's place there. But I could also see someone like Jaime perhaps going there. So yes, I think that the Night's Watch will survive, and I think that they will be a renewed force going forward, not protecting against wildlings, but protecting potentially against a reoccurrence of a White Walker invasion at some point in the future. Let's have another look through. The second, Bran the Builder has clarified this is the second wall theory. Bran, I didn't want to steal your thunder if you were holding that one back, but as you've mentioned it in the chat, I will mention it here as well. The second wall at the neck. This is a theory that Bran has come up with that I think I've seen elsewhere as well. That the reason why the neck is so waterlogged the reason we're given is that this was a great piece of magic that the children of the forest performed to try and flood that part of the world, to try and prevent the northward expansion of humanity. Now, that's one theory, but another one is that if there was a second wall, a huge ice wall, if that was destroyed and the ice all melted, that might well leave an area of land which is waterlogged. And so that is the theory, that the second wall could be at the neck. That's also, you might think, quite a good defensive position across the narrowest part of Westeros in the middle. Okay, let's... Living My Rhapsody says, why do you think the wall was weeping? It should have been getting colder, not warmer when the winter was coming. I think that's a very good question. I think... So I think there are 2 or 3 answers to this one. One of which is that it might not just be a matter of the weather, the temperature that is keeping the wall up. It's also magic, and so perhaps the magic itself is in some way weakening. Or perhaps this is actually and it's quite a sort of a visual metaphor, a weeping. If the wall itself is weeping, what is the wall sad for? Perhaps this is some early warning sign for people that the North has forgotten. As we've been looking at, the North is supposed to remember many things, but the North has forgotten a lot of things. So added to which, I think there probably are just some climate reasons why a big wall of ice does not just stay a big wall of ice, even if it does start getting a bit cold. It doesn't look like, even with winter coming, it doesn't look like it's everything. Every bit of water is freezing immediately. So maybe that's just that's what happens to big walls of ice. I bow to a superior knowledge of a scientist, if there are any out there. Okay, so. What else have we got going on? Angie D says, I think the North remembers could be the key to the end of the Night King. Possibly that the horn wakes the Starks in the crypts, only they've forgotten. Absolutely, I agree completely. That's I did a video on that whole possibility. I think that the idea is that this was the defense mechanism for humanity, was this the Horn of Winter, which would, if the wall fails for whatever reason, the horn is there to summon the Stark dead. The Stark dead that have been buried there dutifully century after century. They are the people who arise and defeat the Night King. Oh, we've got a super chat. True to You, $10. Thank you so very much. Do you think, with the attitude of Westeros in present day, that the wall could be kept as a penal colony, a sort of being sent to Siberia? Excuse me. It could, but I think, or I hope that that where this is going is a new way of governing the Seven Kingdoms. I think that what we will see is the sweeping away of the old way of governing the Seven Kingdoms by a single autocratic ruler, and I think that we will have some. It's not going to be democracy, but some slightly more egalitarian approach to how the world is run. Now, obviously, even within this slightly more egalitarian approach, there will need to be some people who are sent off to penal colonies or whatever. But I think the idea of it being just a place where prisoners go, people who don't want to be there, is not a sustainable one in the long term. If you look at the current situation, where we often talk about it as if the only people who are going to the wall now are these robbers and murderers and whatever else. They're not the only people who are there. If you look, the North still sends people up there, and Waymar Royce in the prologue to the first book and in the opening scene to the show, he went there as a noble family, still saw it as a noble cause. J.R. Mormont relatively recently saw it as a noble cause and went up there. Obviously, Benjamin Stark did as well, and so there are quite a few examples of people in the North who still saw it as something worth doing. And it's not just a place to send the prisoners. And I think that if it were just a place to send the prisoners, then it would not function as a useful force. The reason why it carried on functioning as a very small but still useful to a degree force was because there were these people who saw it as a good thing to go and do. So I think I would summarize that by saying possibly it will carry on being used as it has been. It certainly has been quite politically expedient to have that purpose there, but I can't see it being just a penal colony of some kind. It's particularly if the White Walkers have been pushed back rather than completely obliterated. I can't see any new form of government coming in saying, oh, well, we're not going to treat the wall and the protection of the north of the kingdom seriously. So I think they will want some good people there, not just prisoners. So I hope that one answers that one true to you. Thanks very, very much for the super chat and the excellent question. Okay, so let's have a look. A few other questions. Who remembers? Leslie Isaac says, who remembers Professor McGonagall, Harry Potter, calling the stone soldiers to fight Voldemort's army in the last Harry Potter movie? That's what I think the Stark Kings will do. Yeah, I think there is a lot of there are a lot of different allusions in different fantasy books and stories that can be built on by George R.R. Martin. We know that he loves taking inspiration from a number of different places, not just in real life, but in also fantasy novels. For me, I think the key sort of thing that he may be drawing on is the Dead Men of Dunharrow, which was from the Lord of the Rings stories. And if you remember watching the third film, The Return of the King, Aragorn goes down and he finds these ghostly figures who will come and fight for him against Sauron's army. And I think that is the kind of the image that I could imagine with the dead Starks rising. A couple of people have also just linked to this, referred me on to Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time books that I've not read for a long time. But in that, there was also a horn that could be blown, curiously, by either humans or wolves, apparently. The horn that could be blown to raise heroes from the dead. Now, I think in that and the Lord of the Rings and also Harry Potter as well, this idea that there might be not just normal human beings fighting for the human beings, but there are some magical ways of bringing people back from the dead or animating statues, perhaps. I think that is very much the inspiration, and I would be very surprised if we don't see that in the books. Not 100% sure about the show, but certainly in the books, I'd be very surprised if we don't see that kind of things. Okay, what else have we got going on there? Oh, Dan English. Sorry, I missed your super chat there a moment ago, Dan. £2. Thank you. Just my question from the Patreon thread, please. I touched on that one earlier about the Night King touching Bran and so on and so forth. So perhaps you hadn't tuned in for that one. I think I won't go over that one again. Hopefully you'll be able to look back at this video and see that one. Who else have we got? Another one from Leslie Isaacs, a question here. Did the ancestors of the Wildlings really choose to stay on the other side, or did they just get stuck? I think it was a bit of both, to be honest. I think that, yes, they did choose to be there because, and this is something that I picked up through my traveler's guide. When you get to Eastwatch, you will find that actually it's not hard to get south of the wall. It's entirely possible. You can just get on a boat and just sort of go around. There are plenty of legends of tunnels under the wall. Gendel and Gorn is one for people who dig into these kind of things. There are tunnels under the wall, apparently, that if you want to go through, you can. On the west of the wall, by the Shadow Tower, there's the Gorge, which is just a way that apparently the Wildlings just go along the bottom of the gorge and bypass the wall there, and quite often go raiding down to sort of Bear Island or somewhere down on the west coast. So they will have seen, thousands of years ago, the Wildlings will have seen the wall go up, and they will have chosen to stay there. The wall didn't just suddenly magically appear and they were stuck. If they'd wanted to come south, they could have done that quite easily, I think. And at any point after that, they could also come and do that quite easily. So in answer to that one, they chose to remain north because that was their homeland. As with many peoples, their homeland was a place that was very important to their self-identity. Okay, guys, I'm going to take a quick pause and just I want to say a few quick messages to my patrons, to my subscribers, who there's a lot of you there in the chat, just to let you know a few things that are coming up. First of all, Westworld. I know that there's a lot of you who are big fans of Westworld. I am as well. If you haven't caught up with Westworld, season 2 starts in 1 month's time, 22nd of April. So there is time to still watch season 1, get up to speed before season 2. I'm doing weekly Westworld videos at the moment, every Tuesday. And tomorrow I'm going to be on another live stream with Justin Thomas over on Justin Thomas's channel, The Justin Thomas Show. So do come in. We're going to go back through another few episodes, I think episodes 4 to 7 of season 1, just recapping, giving people a chance just to get back up to speed before we get into season 2. And I will soon be announcing what my schedule is going to be for during the season for Westworld, what I'm planning to do in terms of videos and live streams on Westworld. So keep an eye out for that one. I mentioned the Traveler's Guides and the Bran videos. I've got 3 Bran videos coming up soon, and the Traveler's Guide is going to be going to the north next. We've gone right along the wall, and next we're going to look at the north. We're going to have a look, start at the last hearth, and then pick off all of the main fortifications and places in the north, Bear Island, the Carhold, and so on. So we're going to look all the way through that. Patrons, I say this every time, thank you so much. I honestly could not carry on doing this without your support, so thank you. It means huge amounts to me. I hope you picked up the audio narration of the Barristan chapter from The Winds of Winter, the pre-release chapter. That, if you haven't, do check out the Patreon page and then the RS feed there for that. The next one of those that I will be doing is the Tyrion chapter, and Tyrion is my favorite character in the books, and so I'm really looking forward to that one. That's coming up. The other thing I wanted to say was about live streams. I've been talking to my patrons, and we've been discussing what the best times are to be doing live streams. This is a good time for a lot of people, but for some people it's not such a good time. So I will be doing a few weekend slots coming up over the next few weeks. So keep an eye out for that, just to sort of allow a few extra people to see this live. And if you're interested in any of that, if you're interested in me narrating the the chapters, the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter, as well as other exclusive audio content, please do go over and have a look at my Patreon page. That's patreon.com/Deep or there's a link down in the description. It would be great if you want to come and join that community. Okay, that's enough from that. Let's get back into a few more of these questions. And then Dan English says, honestly, these live streams are late for me. I understand that completely. They're late for a lot of us on this side of the Atlantic, but that's why I'm trying to sort of mix it up a little bit so that lots of people from lots of different time zones can do this. Just a few other random comments here. Don't know about Westworld. I'm waiting for American Gods second season. Yes, absolutely. There's a lot coming out actually that I'm really excited by. There's for any fans of Neil Gaiman or Terry Pratchett, they in the middle of, or they just finished filming Good Omens, a TV series starring Michael Sheen and David Tennant, which I'm really excited by. But I think that's going to be a year or so before we actually see that, but that's something I'm very much looking forward to. And they've announced, sorry, it's a slight digression, they've announced that there will be season 5 of Black Mirror, so that is another thing that I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to come to another question from my patrons here. This was Cap the Goat, said, could the Night King be a sorcerer along the same lines as the Red Priests or Priestesses? Pardon me. I think the answer to that is yes, in that he is a magic user. The Night King is definitely a magic user. But the kind of magic that he uses is a sort of a mirror version of the Green Seer magic. Now, what I mean by that is if you compare what he does to what Bran does, it's almost a mirror image, but for the dead. So, for example, what we do know is that Bran has got the green sight that he can go in his dreams through the weirwood net. He can travel, he can see things. We know that the Night King can also do that, because when Bran went to look at the Night King saw Bran. So that was a similarity of kind of magic. But there's also what the Night King does to raise the dead bodies. Now, that is indeed a reanimation, the kind of things that we have seen the Red Priests do, for example. But rather than reanimating them and giving them allowing them to do what they want, their spirit or whatever, the essence of who they are, to carry on, they then seem to be controlled by the Night King or the White Walker. Now, this is pretty much this exact same thing as what seems to happen with Warging, with what Bran does with Summer, and also particularly with Hodor. What he does is he gets into Hodor's mind, and it's described in the books that Hodor is still in there, but it's sort of like he hides away in a corner, because Bran literally comes in and takes control of everything that Bran does, that Hodor does. And this is the same kind of thing that the Night King, the White Walkers, seem to do to the bodies that they reanimate. So step 1, they reanimate them. Step 2, they take control. They warg into them. They skin change into them, and they control them like that. So that's in terms of, are they, or is the Night King a sorcerer? Yes, but it's more an undead version of Green Seer abilities. Now, this led me, I did one video ages ago called Is the Night King a Stark? And this is from the idea that perhaps in the show, when the Children of the Forest turned Maid to the first White Walker, what they did was that they made somebody with those powers, with those talents, into a White Walker, and those talents moved across. And so when they made this new kind of being retained those powers. So whether that was intentional or unintentional, what we have is a version of the Green Seer powers being used by the White Walkers, the others. So Cap the Goat, I hope that one covered that one for you. We've got another super chat. LMC, thank you so much. Any thoughts on GRRM's new series on the Sci-Fi Channel? And are you heading to Con of Thrones or SD Comic Con? Do I have any thoughts on GRM's new series on the Sci-Fi Channel? I'm afraid I don't. Sorry, it's not something I've been keeping huge amounts of tabs on. I will have a look out for it though. My general feeling on all of these things is that I really want him to be concentrating on things that I want him to concentrate on, as I'm sure you all do. So I'd personally much rather he focus his time in on A Song of Ice and Fire and the Dunk and Egg stories. But if he's doing it, I think it will be excellent. So no, I'm afraid I can't talk very intelligently about that one. And am I heading to Con of Thrones or Comic-Con? This year, I'm afraid not. I'm hoping next year that I'm planning to free my schedule so that I can come across to them. There is, for any British people watching, there is what looks like quite an interesting event down in Kent. That's the I think it's called something like Thrones Fest or something like that, that I am looking at going along to, which should be quite fun. They've got quite a few of the cast are going along there for that, and as well as having a lot of the people who were involved in the training people to be doing a lot of the combat. So, for example, they've got some jousting with some of the people who are involved in the jousting scenes in Game of Thrones going along there, and some of the archers are along there as well. So I'm certainly looking to be going to one or two things. I think there's also a sort of a version of Comic-Con also happening in the UK, which I'm going to be going along to. So this year I'm going to be focusing on mainly UK based conventions. Next year I certainly hope to be coming across to Con of Thrones. So I hope that one answers that one for you, LMC. And but I do know that there's a lot of really good people going across, actually. I know that Azora Hype Kyle is going to go across. Gemma, Secrets of the Citadel, is going to be there. Mark Sahunts is going to be there. LML is going to be there. So lots of people who've been on this channel and people who I know personally who are really good people are definitely going to be there. So so do go along and do say hi to those guys for me and give them my apologies. Kathy Stark, $4.99. Thank you so much. How extensive is the library at the Wall? Maester Aemon was very learned and wise. Do you think answers we seek are in some long-forgotten tome on a shelf? I don't think we're told exactly how extensive it is. But what we are told is that there are some things there that are not even at the Citadel. Now, Maester Aemon collected a lot of things. He also had quite a lot of correspondence with Rhaegar Targaryen, and he had books sent up to him at the Wall. Now, so it's got a lot of things there. A lot of them are very focused in on things you would expect a Northern Library to have about the nature of the Children of the Forest, or weirwood trees, or the history of the Night's Watch, and things like that. But we are told there are some tomes that have come across from old Valyria. So will it have the answers to some of the questions that we've got, or the characters have got? My guess is probably no, if only because Maester Aemon was there for so long, and he didn't say, I know the answer to this. It's in this tome. Sam was there for a long time, and he may not have had time to read everything, but he also didn't say, I know the answer to this because we've got this book here at Castle Black. I think that the answers, such that we will find them in books, will be down in the Citadel, because we are told explicitly that the Maesters, before the Doom of Valyria, the Maesters did gain a lot of knowledge and bring it back. So I think that any knowledge that we've got, linking up the ideas of what Dragonglass might be, as we saw on the show, Valyrian steel, a few secrets there. We know that they certainly know how to remake, not forge new Valyrian steel, but how to make links for the chain out of Valyrian steel. So there's some knowledge of Valyrian steel there, and there may well be some knowledge of the first time the Long Night happened. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on, as well as the death of dragons, how to kill a dragon. That would be quite a game changer. So there's an awful lot of knowledge at the Wall, some, but I think the main reservoir of knowledge in both the show and in the books we will find is going to be at the Citadel. So I hope that one answers that, Kathy Stark. Let's have a look, see what else we've got going on. Aaron Arguelles, says, and sorry, I'm sure I just mangled your name there, says, how much do you think Lord Commander Mormont knew about Craster and the children he was offering up? He didn't seem too offended when John and Sam told him about what was going on with that. 1 second. This is an excellent question. I think from the conversations that they had, it seems clear that the Rangers knew what Craster was doing, but they didn't know that the others were really taking the children. They thought what was happening was that Craster was a creepy old man, really quite sick, took all his sons and said he was sacrificing them to the others. And I think basically what the Rangers thought was he was literally just killing them. I think that's what they thought was happening. I don't think they thought that the others were literally there, or they would have reported back, hang on a moment, we think there's some others going on around here. So they thought that was happening, and they turned a blind eye to it. Now, this is the kind of thing that it feels a little bit awkward for us, make us feel a little bit icky, but they decided, the Rangers this is, and Lord Mormont also seem to be implicitly accepting this, that the value to the Night's Watch of having this home, this defendable place that they could go to with a warm fire, somewhere that they could reprovision, that was a little way out, away from north of the Wall, where they could be sure that they were going to get, if not a warm welcome, then they would at least be able to warm up and dry off their stuff and get some more food. That they thought was important enough for them to be able to turn a blind eye to what was going on. So did they know what was happening? I don't think they knew the full extent of it, but they thought some pretty horrible things were happening and they just turned a blind eye to it. It means that, as with all characters in Game of Thrones, J.R. Mormont was not perfect. He did not know exactly what was going on there, but he was willing to put aside his morals for what he thought was necessary. And I think it's left to us as a reader to make a judgment on that. So they did know quite a bit. Yeah, is the short answer. Picking a few other things here at random. Do you think this is Ashley Weeks? Do you think the God's Eye will play any part of season 8? How about in the books? Yes, in the books, I am convinced that the God's Eye, the Isle of Faces, is the hub of the where the Children of the Forest are. I think the Children of the Forest probably still are there. The Isle seems to be protected by the Green Men. We don't know exactly who or what that order is, but there seem to be a huge amount of weirwood trees on there, and this was the place at which the pact between humans and the Children of the Forest was signed. So this is an incredibly important place. In the books, I think that this is going to be one of the main things that the others will be heading towards. Whether they will be able to get there is another matter, because of course it's an island, and we know that they seem to have problems going across open water, and we're told that it's quite a deep lake, so it may well be that they can't get there. I think that was a deliberate placement there, incidentally, by the Children of the Forest. The other place that we seem to have learnt from the show is very important, being Dragonstone, with its mountains or mines of dragon glass. That again is an island, so I don't think it's a coincidence that both of those places are islands out with open sea around them. On the show, I think that they have not mentioned this pretty much at all, because they're just going to leave it be. I think that they have skipped a huge amount of the plot with Howland Reed. Howland Reed in the books is going to be absolutely pivotal to understanding what happened in the past, back during the time of Robert's Rebellion. And Howland Reed, I think, is going to be essential to what happens in the future. I think they've missed off all of that, and I think that on the show, then you're going to see the White Walkers attacking the two places that we have been shown so much throughout the show, being Winterfell and King's Landing, because that's where the people are, and they seem to have turned the White Walkers largely into people who are into monsters who are trying to kill humans. So that's the that's what I think is going to happen on the show. I think they're just going to ignore it. I think this is completely random, but my personal view is that Rhaegar and Lyanna probably met up again, perhaps also got married on the Isle of Faces. It seems to make sense to me. We hear that they met up for the second time. I think it was something like 10 leagues from Harrenhal, which is, as Harrenhal is on the edge of the God's Eye Lake, that either means inland or on the Isle of Faces itself. And Lyanna, who was very northern, if she was going to get married, I think that the place she would want to get married is in front of a weirwood tree. And weirwood trees in the south are very hard to come by. There aren't very many of them, but there are lots on the Isle of Faces. So I think that was central to huge amounts of what happened back then. But on the show, I think they're just ignoring it. Sorry. Okay, let's have I think Tiziana Vitali says, don't you think that the number of Lord Commanders makes the accepted chronology possibly wrong? $5, first of all. £5. Thank you very much for that. If you could just unpack that one for me, perhaps in just one of the comments underneath that, as to why that might be possibly wrong. One of the things that we were talking about, the library, it's very clear that Sam tries to add up the amount of Lords Commander, and he can't do it because the records don't seem to go back. I think he only gets up to like 600 and something. The number of Lords Commander is quite a tough subject to sort of kind of get into, because we are told repeatedly by George R.R. Martin that 8,000 years ago is a time of mythology where everything we should just take with a huge pinch of salt. And it seems that the numbers of Lords Commander that we know are quite thematic. So, for example, in the books, the Night's King was the 13th Lord Commander, and he reigned for 13 years. And we all know 13 is an unlucky number, and it just seems just too perfect to tie in too easily for that to be the case. And similarly, to come up to 1,000 right at this point, it seems very coincidental. So does it make the accepted chronology possibly wrong? I think it probably does, but only because everything looking back that far is possibly wrong. I don't think they know quite how many Lords Commander there were, and so they just sort of picked a number to go with it. So I hope that sort of unpacks that, Tiziana, but do put a comment in on it down here if there was something else you were meaning by that. But I hope that was what you were meaning to say. Kerry McDonald says, cheers, Robert. I indulge in some of the script leaks. You're more than welcome. There are plenty of them out there, and I would personally suggest that you take all of them with a huge pinch of salt at this stage. Leslie Powell asks, if the Night's Watch still exists and if Jaime survives, will he become the Lord Commander? I think that's entirely possible, but I think it's also possible that Jaime will die. I'm afraid I think it's in the books. I think it said 3 times. Cersei says it twice. I think Jaime says it once, that they came into the world together. They will leave the world together. So I think what we will see is that they do die together. I could see the Jaime's dying act being to kill Cersei. I could see that's how it happens. That said, as I mentioned it earlier, I think he is one of the candidates that, if the Night's Watch continues, he is a commander. He appears to be a reasonable general out in the field, if not an exceptional one. And I think that he would be a good candidate to be the new Lord Commander. Ed seems to be a good guy, but his sole qualification for being the Lord Commander appears to be that he was friends with Jon, not that he got voted in, not that he has particular skills of leadership or anything like that. So I can't see that he would. He probably won't survive season 8 anyway, to be honest. But even if he did, I couldn't see that he would be the right person to take it forward. What else have we got going on here? Dan English says the script leaks are clown shoes. Well, I think that there's, as I say, a big pinch of salt with any of them. Sean Cray says, do you think there's, or actually Laura D, I just see that above there. Take a drink, you're parched. I am, thank you. Much better. Sean Cray, do you think there's a hidden community of White Walkers up north? We've only seen a few on the show, and Craster has been giving his sons up for a while. Do you think there would be more? Yes. This picks up on a few different unfinished thoughts I have that I'm probably going to start trying to tease out over the next few videos, to be honest. So I'll probably go off on a couple of quick tangents, but send a super chat if you want me to shut up. So the first one is, we do not know about how White Walkers age. This is a thing which is one of the big mysteries. We know so little about White Walkers and the others. If they are taking babies, that seems to imply that they grow up. Otherwise, if they're turning them into mini White Walkers, they presumably must grow up. But does that mean, therefore, that they have a sort of a normal human lifespan? It's not entirely clear. The implication was that the first White Walker we saw turned by the by the children of the forest was the Night King, which would mean that the Night King lived for 8,000 years or so. That doesn't seem likely. Added to which, the cave paintings we saw from the children of the forest seem to have the Night King with a beard, whereas the Night King that we've seen doesn't have a beard. So can the White Walkers grow beards, or was that a different person? I told you this was going off on slight tangents, but all of that is going to show we do not know what this culture is. Indeed, George R.R. Martin has sort of said he's not sure that they've got a culture because they are other. They are different to humans. It is a different form of life. But for me, the implication of them getting children is that the children grow up. And if they're growing up, then as this has happened, they've been taking children from Craster for about 40 years, as far as we can tell, the younger ones still won't be part of the army. We would only see the older ones. But if they have survived and if they do age, then way up in the north, yes, there must be some kind of community of White Walkers. At which point we get into the how do they procreate, which is an entire different discussion, but does make you think, are there female others? Was the Night's Queen in the books a female other? Are they all just hidden up north? So that is a very long-winded way of saying we do not know. The second part of this is something that I'm definitely going to be doing a video on, because I think this is absolutely crucial to our understanding of the White Walkers, the others, and also, incidentally, the children of the forest. Because one thing that George R.R. Martin has been very clear on is pointing out, or is saying that what he dislikes, one of the things that he dislikes in other fantasy series is the way that entire races are treated as being exactly the same. So if you go in to the Lord of the Rings, probably does it slightly better than some of the others, but if you go to the Lord of the Rings, the orcs are all the same. They seem to be completely interchangeable. In the films, they tried to draw out specific characters and all the rest of it, but in the books, there seems to just be an amorphous mass. Orcs are orcs are orcs. Similarly, you could have elves are all the same. Dwarves are all grumpy and short and want to have fights but like to drink beer. So they're all exactly the same. George R.R. Martin doesn't like that. And he says, why should these non-human races be all the same? Humans aren't all the same. Humans don't agree on things. Humans have different views on things. So we should look at these other races and expect them to have different views on things. So I think it is entirely possible that what we are seeing in terms of the White Walkers coming south is not the entire nation coming south, but just a faction, a group of them moving south. Similarly, with the children of the forest, perhaps it wasn't everybody, all of the children who turned, who made the first White Walkers. Maybe this was just a faction of them. So all of that stemmed from a question about, do I think that there are some more White Walkers up north? And I think the answer is probably yes. But as you got from my rather extended thoughts there, I think that this is because we've only seen the tip of the iceberg of what the White Walkers actually are. Okay, so I'm gonna draw this to close in a few more minutes. So if you've got any more sort of burning questions or anything, do start putting them. But I'm going to try and pick up a few more questions just as we're starting to draw this to a close. Alexandra Sandu says, "Do you think in the books the whole wall will fall, not just a breach like in the show?" Yes. So Somebody earlier on in the chat, I noticed it, maybe it was Alexander again, pointed out that the wall on the show has not fallen. There was merely a breach in it. So the dragonfire took down a small chunk that allowed people, the army of the dead, to go through. The whole thing did not fall. I think that's probably what's going to happen in the books. I can't see that the whole thing would fall except for by magic. And the only thing that we have been told about that would potentially bring down the wall is the Horn of Winter. And for me, I don't think it does that. I don't think that we will. The legend of the Horn of Winter is that it was blown once and it raised giants from the earth. Now, it didn't say anything about bringing down the wall. And if the wall had collapsed, if the whole thing had fallen down at that point, that would definitely be part of the legend, because that's the kind of thing that would be so cataclysmic that you would absolutely have to record it. It's the details of the names of who blew a horn or whatever are actually insignificant compared to the whole wall coming down. So do I think in the books the whole wall will fall? No, I don't. I think it will be something quite similar. Whether it will be through dragonfire, ice dragonfire, I don't know, but I think that it will be a breach rather than the entire wall falling down. Hampus Holm, do all the White Walkers have the same agenda, or are there other factions? I covered that one in just a moment ago. Misty306 says, remember what happened after the mutiny? Craster's wives warned Sam that his sons were coming. Yeah, I think Craster's wives had an idea of what was going on. Craster knew what was going on, but I think that the Rangers who went north of the wall from the Night's Watch, they had an outline of what they thought was going on and were happy to turn a blind eye to it, and were quite happy if they heard any rumors of others. They were quite happy to disregard them because the others hadn't been seen for millennia. So yes, Craster knew what was going on. Craster's wives knew what was going on, but the members of the Night's Watch were happy to turn a blind eye to it. Danielle Marston says, do I think that the Targaryen history book that is coming out will have further clues to the end game? This is the Fire and Blood, which is a two-part history of the Targaryens that George R.R. Martin has been co-writing. We will apparently get part one of that this year. Which I'm very much looking forward to. I think it's going to be really interesting. Whether this gives any more clues to the end game, I'm not so sure. The thing which I think might actually is the Tales of Dunk and Egg, that at the moment are quite nice little stories. But we have to remember that Dunk and Egg, they met their end, and if the stories of the Tales of Dunk and Egg go through their lives, they met their end at the tragedy at Summerhall, which is one of these things which is a huge mystery we don't know huge amounts about. I wonder whether we will find out what happened at the tragedy at Summerhall, and I wonder whether we will find out, because that was, for those who don't know, that was an attempt by Aegon V, Egg, to give birth to dragons. He was trying to kickstart, effectively, to do what Daenerys did later, kickstart the magic and bring dragons back to Westeros. But all that seemed to happen was that there was this huge amount of fire and lots of people died. So I think we will find out what happened there, and I think it may well be that actually something important happened on the magical plane, not just in terms of a human tragedy. So will the Fire and Blood have some clues? It may well have some clues to the end game, but I think that not the sort of the game-changing clues that we're looking for. I think it's just going to be a lot more really good background. A couple more questions. Leslie Isaac says, unless George R. R. Martin's last 2 books are 2,000 pages long each, there is no way he can tie up all his loose ends successfully. What I've heard is that they're currently at least 1,500 pages each. So you know what? He can do that. There is a lot of material he's got in there. I am convinced that when The Winds of Winter comes out, it's going to be in 2 volumes, because if it is 1,500 pages, then that's whacking great big book, and I think they'll break it down like they did a couple of the other books in A Song of Ice and Fire. They will break that down into 2. Okay, let's just pick up, as I say, last couple of questions, unless there's anything urgent. Lots of love for the Duncan Egg stories. Absolutely, they're great. If you've not picked up on them, then do have a look for them. Actually, there's a link down, an Amazon link down in the description if you want to buy them through Amazon. That supports this channel at no extra cost to you. So if you're interested in that, then go and do that. Just a couple of quick super chats. Kerry McDonald, $2. Just wanted to say cheers, Robert. Thank you very much, Kerry. Dan English, £2. Just another thanks for your hard work. Thank you very much. And Aaron says, gracias, Robert, from Albuquerque, New Mexico, $1.99. Thank you so much. And what have we got? Joseph Martin says, please answer Eduardo Blanco's question. Okay, let me see whether I can quickly find it. Q&A. When Drogo died inside the tent, shapes were dancing. She glimpsed the shadow of a great wolf and another like a man wreathed in flames. What's the meaning of that? That is a very good question. I will have to have a look at that, and I will come back to that. I think on one level, this is very much just a matter of showing that there was more going on in terms of the magic that Miri Mazda was bringing. It was she was not just using fire magic. She was not just using the magic of the old gods. She was using both combined. So you've got wolf and you've got flames. So that's just my first go at it, but I think there may well be a lot more in that. So thank you for bringing that one to my attention. I will go and have a proper look at that and see if I can get any more answers. Phil Devereux says, gives $2 super chat. Thank you so much. That's really very kind. Guys, you keep on giving me really interesting questions to answer. I keep on being about to wind this one up, but you keep on giving me lots more questions. Thank you. Aaron Waller, will the Faceless Men have more to do with the plot? So I think on the show, I've done a lot of thinking about this actually for the books. I've got a whole series of videos called Magic, the Maesters and the Faceless Men, which set out what I think the Faceless Men are after, which at a fundamental level, they're trying to well, let's take a step back. What the Faceless Men want is all men must die. That is what their fundamental theological position is. It's not just a cool catchphrase. This is what they believe. All men must die. And what they're looking out at in the world is an awful lot of things that are coming into conflict with that. All men must die is being contradicted by what the Red Priests are doing. Someone dies, they bring them back. It's being contradicted by what the White Walkers are doing. They're stopping people from dying. The bodies are being reanimated. It's contradicted by what Qyburn is doing, stopping the mountain from being dead or resurrecting the mountain. But So I think that what they will be wanting is to try and put a stop to all of this. And I think the most obvious way for them is to get around, is to try and focus in on what people think caused the return of magic, which is what is ultimately allowing all of these things to happen, one could argue. And so they will look at the return of the dragons, because at the time that the dragons returned, suddenly lots of magic became a lot easier. We see it across the piece. We see the pyromancers in King's Landing say, hey, it's suddenly a lot easier to do magic. Danny encounters a fire mage in Karth who suddenly can do huge amounts of extra stuff. We see that Thoros can bring back Beric. There's a lot of things going on, and a lot of people connect that to the return of the dragons. I think that's a bit of an oversimplification. I think that there's a causality issue going on there, but I can get into that in another video. But I think what the Faceless Men are wanting is to get rid of the dragons. And that is why in the books you will find that Jaqen is over in the Citadel trying to learn how to do that. So I think that the Faceless Men have got quite a critical role in the books. On the show, I think that their role has been compacted down into being the people who train Arya to be a kick-ass assassin. So I think, unfortunately, they probably won't have a role to play in the end game. They might allow Jaqen a little cameo somewhere along the piece, but they're not going to have a central role there in the end game. Eduardo Blanco with this is Mexican dollars, 59 Mexican dollars. Thank you so much. That's really kind. Mr. Collar says, I know this isn't a Song of Ice and Fire stream. Have you seen the Hidden Westworld Find Theater video? And will you do a video on it? I will have a look for that when I come off of this live stream and see what's going on with that. Okay, guys, I think with that, I'm probably going to start drawing this to the close. Daniel Marston asked about Winds of Winter chapters. Yes, we can definitely talk about that. From my view, I think that spoilers from the Winds of Winter chapters are out there. George R. R. Martin has read them out loud. They're well known out in the community. There is one caveat that we have to say every single time, incidentally, with that, which is that these are drafts. They're very good drafts. They're well written, but George R. R. Martin always emphasizes the Winds of Winter chapters that he's done could change a bit in the final version. So we shouldn't assume that they're what's going to actually exactly fit into the book. But in terms of the plot, yes, that's fine. And as far as this channel is concerned, I'm very happy to be discussing what happens in the Winds of Winter. Tycat, $3.99. Good chat today, Robert. Thank you very much for that, Tycat. And thank you everyone for the super chats and for the really good questions that have come through. Sorry if I didn't get to your question, by the way. If you put up a question there, it happens quite a lot that when the chat moves through quite quickly, there are quite a few that I don't get to, so apologies for that. I would just want to round off again by just saying a big thank you to my patrons, a big thank you to everyone who did the super chats. This really, the support that I get through this, it really is what can keep me going doing this. So thank you so much. Please do check out the link to my Patreon page and keep an eye out. Tomorrow I'm going to be over on Justin Thomas's channel for a Westworld live stream, and there will be a new Traveler's Guide video coming out and Bran video the next day. Okay, guys. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. I will do some more solo question and answer live streams in the future, I'm sure, but I'll try and get some more people on for some more chats for the live streams as well. I've really enjoyed this. I hope you have too. Thank you all. Take care.